Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be filming another video for my medical school application series. And this time I'm going to be answering 2 questions about how to choose the medical schools that you're applying to. The first question that I get asked all the time by my students is, how many medical schools should I even be applying to? I've talked to people who have applied to 5, and I've talked to people who have applied to like crazy numbers, like 40 or 50 medical schools. And I think both of those extremes are a little much. My personal recommendation to you guys is to aim to apply to between 20 to 30 medical schools. Now, if you are an exceptional candidate and you've aced your MCAT, done really well in college courses, and have tons of research experience and leadership skills to boot, you probably don't even need to go to 20, and 15 would be sufficient. But for all us mortals out there who aren't getting perfect scores on everything, I think that 20 to 30 medical schools gives you a nice safety net of having enough options to choose from, while also ensuring that you're not overwhelmed by secondary essays, which can be quite a bit burdensome. And so I recommend a 20 to 30 school range, with the caveat that you apply to a good mix of safety, target, and reach schools. Now, a lot of people say that there is no such thing as a safety school in medical school admissions, just because it is so hard to get into any medical school. And to a point, that's true. However, I kind of define safety schools as schools that are the easiest ones to get into, and where maybe your admission statistics are a little bit better than that school's. As I'm sure you guys know, target schools are schools that the GPA and MCAT averages are pretty similar to what you have, whereas reach schools have GPA and MCAT averages that are much higher than yours. So I think it's important that you have these target, safety, and reach schools, and you might want to aim for let's say 8 of each. That will give you a sum total of 24 schools that you're applying to. But as long as you're not just applying to 25 reach schools and completely neglect target and safety schools, I think that sticking to a 20 to 30 school range is good for your sanity as well as your chances of getting in. Now I'm going to address question number 2, which is, how do I choose which medical schools to apply to? There are so many medical schools in the US, between DO schools, MD schools, state schools, private schools, the whole 9 yards. And it can be pretty daunting, especially because unlike college, you oftentimes don't go and actually visit these medical schools prior to applying. And so you're going off of what you see on websites, what you read from other students, maybe you talk to your friends about. And it can be pretty daunting to have to create this list of 20 to 30 schools when you don't know too much about each school. And so I've compiled my own list of suggestions of how to choose between all the medical schools out there to make sure you're applying to ones that are best fits for you. The first thing I encourage you to think about is the grading system at that school. There's a lot of differences in grading systems between medical schools. A small few medical schools are literally pass-fail throughout all 4 years. A good number of medical schools will be pass-fail throughout the preclinical curriculum and then incorporate grades in the clinical rotation portion of medical school. And then there are schools that are graded throughout the entirety of the school. Both preclinical and clinical work is done on a graded basis. And then to make things even more complicated, some of the pass-fail schools have secret ranking where, it's pass-fail, but it's also ranked. So although your grades don't really matter, they also kind of do matter. And so it's important to really check into the specifics of the grading system for each university that you're looking to apply to. In my own personal experience, I think it's so helpful to have a medical school that is at least pass-fail throughout the preclinical years. Medical school is so stressful already, and I think adding in the stress of grades on top of everything makes the whole experience so much worse. However, if you have a medical school that's pass-fail, I think it enables so much more collaboration with your classmates. It brings the stress level down for everyone, but it doesn't really inhibit how much you're learning. It just makes the whole learning process better and more enjoyable. The second thing I encourage you to think about when choosing a school is the preclinical curriculum. Some schools do all of their preclinical training in 1 year. Some schools do it in about 18 months, and some schools do it in 3 years would be way too long. Some schools do it in 2 years. And I think it's up to you guys to think about what would work best for you. Obviously, a preclinical curriculum of 1 year is going to be really stressful and intense, but it's also going to get all of that stuff out of the way as quickly as possible. A school with a 2-year preclinical curriculum, typically it does things at a slower pace, it's a little bit calmer, but at the same time, then you're cramming your clinical rotations into a shorter period of time. So it's important to think about what your own needs are, the style that you best learn in, and find a school that best matches that based on the length of its preclinical curriculum. Another thing to think about is the class size of the medical school. Some medical schools, like Dartmouth, for example, have super tiny class sizes of under 100 students, whereas other med schools, like Drexel, has class sizes of over 250 students. So if you want a really small, close-knit batch of students where you can know everyone, you can know where everyone went to college, what everyone wants to specialize in, you might want to apply to smaller medical schools. Whereas if you love the idea of having a ton of classmates that you can meet and get to know, lots of different diverse opinions and backgrounds, a larger medical school might be a better fit for you. The next thing I urge you to consider is the location of the medical schools that you're applying to. If you hate big cities and you are so cold when it's the winter, I don't think Chicago should be high up on your list of places to look for medical schools in. And so I think it's important for you to consider what kind of climate you like, how far close you want to be to family, if you like small towns or big cities better. I think a lot of people underestimate the importance of choosing a location that really matches your personality and really is a fit for what you're looking for. Because although a lot of your time will be spent studying and will be spent in hospitals, there's also still a fair amount of time that you'll be spending in the city you live in. And if your de-stress day involves you walking around a city and you freaking hate cities, you're not going to be very de-stressed. And so I think location is important. And another element of location is cost of living. So if you are on a pretty tight budget, medical schools in San Francisco and New York might not be the best choice. Different costs of living in different cities can have a huge effect on how much money you actually spend during medical school. And then similarly to cost of living, think also about the tuition at different medical schools. An in-state public school is probably going to cost a heck of a lot less money than an out-of-state public or even a private school, just because funding is different, resources are different. And at the end of the day, if trying to minimize your spending for medical school is important to you, you may want to consider tuition prices as a huge factor in deciding where to apply. Another factor that I think is important, although some people try to pretend it's not, is the prestige or status of the program you're attending. For some people, this will matter greatly, and for some people, it won't. Let me explain a little bit more. If you are hell-bent on becoming an ophthalmologist one day, and you want to be the chair of the department at an academic institution, the name and prestigiousness of your medical school is going to matter a ton. As much as some programs like to say it doesn't, the fact of the matter is name holds a lot of worth in competitive specialties and in academic positions. And so if those are things you might want to consider in your future, it's important to be considering name and prestige of the institution you're going to for medical school. On the flip side, let's say instead you know you want to do family medicine. You've wanted to do it your whole life, you want to practice in a rural area, and you have absolutely no interest in being part of an academic medical center. For you, prestige and status of the medical school you're going to is probably not very important, because at the end of the day, no matter where you go, those dreams you want to accomplish will be well within reach. And so I think the prestige and status element really depends on your own career ambitions, your own goals, and what sorts of things you hope to achieve with your MD. Another thing to think about is the graduation rate and match list of different medical schools. The graduation rate is pretty self-explanatory. No one wants to pay a ton of money just to go to school and then not end up graduating. And so look at schools that have high graduation rates to ensure that the amount of money you're paying for tuition is actually going to pay off in the long run. Another thing I like to encourage students to consider is the match list of the medical schools. This might seem kind of irrelevant because you're like, well, those people aren't me. Their experience isn't mine. Like, who cares where they matched? But at the end of the day, match list is important because it gives you an idea of where students graduating from that school realistically end up. If you have your heart set on being a dermatologist at Stanford and no one has ever gone to Stanford for dermatology in the last 10 years of that medical school, it's not super likely that you're going to end up there either. So it's important that you look at the match list of the medical schools you're considering and seeing if the places that those students went realistically are where you would hope to go one day too. And then finally, another thing to consider is the actual degree you'll get from that medical school. As I'm sure you're familiar, there are two types of medical schools in the US, osteopathic or DO schools and allopathic or MD schools. There's a lot of differences between the schools. There's a lot of things that go into choosing which one's the best fit for you. So I'm going to make a whole separate video on just distinguishing between those two schools. But for now, just think about the fact that there are different kinds of medical degrees that you can actually get from med schools, and try to figure out which one would be most appropriate for your needs and career goals. So I think that's all for now. Thank you guys for following along with that pretty long list. And if you have any questions at all about choosing medical schools or anything I mentioned in this video, please either comment below or shoot me an email. My email is listed in the description box below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe to my channel for more tips about the medical school application process. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much.